Hi everyone, Allie here from TheFamilyMeeple, and today I am back with the next section of my top 100 games of all-time countdown for 2023. Today we have made it to the top 20 games of all time, and we'll be looking at games 20 through 11. So these are the ones that just barely fell out of my top 10. They are all excellent games that I absolutely love and am always excited to play. If you haven't been watching from the beginning, I definitely would encourage you to check out the full playlist, which is available on my YouTube channel. You can start with the introduction, which is linked in the description below, to find out a little bit more about how I created this list, as well as how I created my list in 2021, which I will compare to if there are any crossovers. With that, let's go ahead and get started with number 20. Coming in at number 20 is a new game on the list. This is Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem is a 2018 game designed by Stefan Feld with artwork from Lalanda Hrushka, and the publisher is Alea and Ravensburger. Carpe Diem is my favorite Stefan Feld game, and it's actually the only one that made it on this list. In Carpe Diem, you are going to be doing tile placement on a personal player board in front of you. The best thing about Carpe Diem is actually how the scoring works for each round. So in Carpe Diem, each player will begin with a blank board in front of them, and you will add to the edge of your board 4 frame pieces. The frame pieces will show you different types of tiles that you will want to have arranged on your board, crossing the line demarcation on your board. So for example, you may want to have a river or a lake crossing across a specific horizontal or vertical line on your personal player board. You'll have several of these on each of the frames that will give you some guidance in how you're going to arrange your personal player board versus how the other players may be arranging their player boards. Each round, you are going to be drafting 7 tiles and adding them to your player board. There is the potential to get some additional tiles, but they're hard to come by, so usually you'll have 7, maybe 8, at most probably no more than 9 or 10 each round. At the end of the round, once you've placed all of your tiles for that round, you will be scoring based on scoring objective cards that were drawn and placed for this particular game. These scoring objective cards are laid out on the left-hand side of the main board in the center of the table, and on your turn to score, you will be placing one of your colored markers at the joining place of 2 of the cards. So you will score 2 of the cards each scoring round. Once you've scored the 2 cards, then your marker will stay there for the rest of the game. So those 2 cards can never be scored together again by you or another player for that game. So you want to carefully think out which scoring cards you can and want to score each round, and plan out your buildings on your player board accordingly. It can become very challenging because you may not be able to complete the objectives on both of the cards, and if you can't complete one of the objectives, then you'll actually lose points instead of gaining points. Not all of the objective cards will give you points either. Some of them will give you coins or bread tokens that you'll be able to use later in the game. The way that you're drafting tiles in this game is also a lot of fun. In the center of the board, you will have different areas that will be filled in at the beginning of each round with 4 tiles. On your turn, you have to move from the location you're at to a new location by which you will draft a tile. If there are 4 tiles in the location, you can take any of them. Once tiles have been taken equal to the number of players, so in a 2-player game, when the second tile is taken from a location, the rest of the tiles in that location get cleared out. So you also can't bet on getting more than 1, maybe 2 tiles from the same location, for example, in a 2-player game, because they'll end up getting cleared out. You'll continue each turn moving to a new location, drafting a tile and adding it to your board. You do have to place the tiles adjacent to a tile that you've previously placed, so it does have some rules as far as how you can place tiles. You also have to make sure that all of the edges match. So if the edge is grass on the outside, you have to actually match that with a grass edge on the tile that you've selected. You'll play over 4 rounds, scoring at the end of each of the rounds, including the last round. Then there's some additional end game scoring that you'll do for things like scoring tiles from collecting fountains in your board and building villas with a large number of chimneys in place. How far you've gone up on the banderole track is another way that you can score points, and you'll earn a small amount of points for any leftover resources that you have on your player board. This game is a lot of fun. It's one that I tried at the Dice Tower retreat and just absolutely fell in love with it and ended up tracking down my own copy. I have primarily played this solo with a fan-made solo variant from Board Game Geek, and it's included on my current 10x5 solo challenge. So I'll have more information about how it plays solo with the fan-made mode in my upcoming video in May. But for now, that is my number 20, Carpe Diem. Number 19 is another new game. This is Solenia. Solenia is a 2018 game published by Pearl Games. It was designed by Sébastien Dujardin, and the artwork is from Vincent Dutrait. Solenia is a really unique game from the other things that are sort of in my collection. It is a resource and hand management game that's played on a modular board in the center. The most intriguing thing about Solenia is the module board in the center, where you're going to be placing a yellow airship on the center tile that makes up this board. As you are playing cards onto the board during the game, you will be moving the airship up. And as you move the airship up, tiles will actually fall off of the end of the board, get flipped over and added to the top of the board so that the airship is always in the center of the modular board on the table. During the game, you will be playing a card from your hand, and it needs to be played either adjacent to the airship or adjacent to a card that you've previously played on another turn that still is out on the board. The cards are unique in this that they have holes in the center so that you can actually see what the floating island is on the board where you're placing your card. So you'll take one of your cards and you'll place it out on the board. The card will have a value, and that will dictate the number of resources that you will collect from the island that you place the card on. So I might place my card on an island that gives me wood resources. If the value of the card is 1, I get 1 wood resource to add to my ship supply. If the value is 0, I actually won't earn any resources from that island on that current turn, and it will move the airship forward. One of the reasons you might want to play these cards, and you will have to play cards with a value of 0, is that every time you move that airship forward, like I said, the last tile is going to fall off of the modular board, and any cards that are on that tile when it falls off and is going to be flipped over will actually activate again, and you'll get the bonus on the bottom of the card. Your goal throughout this game is to collect resources in order to turn them in for points that you will be claiming on specific objective tiles that are out on the board. There are objectives for the daytime side of the board pieces as well as nighttime sides of the board pieces, and you'll be turning them in and adding them into your airstrip, which will also gain you additional bonuses, resources, and points at the end of the game. Solenia plays extremely quickly, and it's one that has worked really well with introducing to new players. It's very simple. It certainly is a family weight game, and it also includes some sort of modular expansion elements where you can increase the complexity and difficulty just slightly in the game when you've become familiar with the basic mechanics. Solenia is a beautiful game. I love the unique cards with the holes in the center, and it does include a solo mode, which I have played quite a bit. So that is my number 19, Solenia. Number 18 is yet another game that was not on my list in 2021. This is Underwater Cities. Underwater Cities is also a 2018 game. It was designed by Vladimir Suchy with artwork from Euledrim and Milan Vavron. It was published by Delicious Games and Rio Grande Games here in the States. Underwater Cities is actually the first game from Vladimir Suchy that I ever played. It's one that I played at a game night, and I believe we played at 4 players, so it was on the higher end of the player count for that game. And I remember enjoying it at the time, but when I played it originally, it was one of the heaviest, most complex games that I had ever been exposed to and played. And it wasn't one that called out to me as something to add to the collection, because at the time I was not really into solo gaming, and I knew that it was a game that my family would not be able to play. At the time, my daughters were, I believe, 5 and 7, and so it certainly wasn't a game for them. Underwater Cities is considered a medium-heavy game. It is definitely on the more complex side of what has been on my list so far. If you're not familiar, Underwater Cities is a hand management and worker placement game. On each of your turns, you are going to place one of your markers out onto one of the locations on the central game board. You will also be playing a single card from your hand at the same time. You can activate the card that's played only if the color of the card matches the color of the location that you have selected to go to. If the card that you play doesn't match, you won't be able to activate that card and you'll simply discard it instead. But if it does match the same color, for example, I go to a location in the green section and I play a green card, then I can choose to activate the card or the location in any order. I do have to complete the action of the location or the card completely before I move on to the next one. You can't mix and match them together. Underwater Cities plays over a number of rounds. At the end of several rounds, you will have a intermittent scoring where you will look at your board and score for the elements that you have built out onto your player board, as well as any scoring cards or production cards that you've acquired up to that point in the game. You are building out an underwater city on your own personal player board as the primary objective of the game. So as you're going out to these different worker placement locations and playing these cards, it's all in an effort to actually build underwater cities in a network, build tunnels to connect them, and then build laboratories and different buildings to help you collect resources during each of the production phases. I have primarily played this game solo, and the solo mode is exceedingly difficult with a very challenging goal for victory. So I tend to just play it as a beat your own score, and I usually score somewhere, I think around in the 80s when the winning objective is 100 points. I've also played this game on Yucata online, so you can check it out there as well if you enjoy online gaming. But this is one that I have really enjoyed more and more every time that I've played it. I like the challenge of trying to best figure out how to chain the cards together, which cards are worth keeping, which cards are not worth keeping, and how to play your actions in the most efficient way possible. So that is my number 18, Underwater Cities. Coming in at 17 is another new game to the list. This is Everdell. Everdell was also published in 2018. Apparently this is my 2018 section of the list. It was designed by James A. Wilson with artwork from Andrew Bosley, Cody Jones, and Dan May, and it was published by Starling Games. Everdell is a game that has absolutely stunning artwork and fantastic components, which I had been interested in for quite a while after getting into the hobby in 2020. Because the price point of the collector's editions was so high, I had always hesitated to pick this up. When Starling Games launched their campaign on Kickstarter for the complete collection, I figured it was a great time to jump in and pick this one up because I was never going to get a better price for the all-in game of Everdell. Before pulling the trigger on backing the game, because it was very expensive, I played this game at my local game group at 4 players, I believe, and really enjoyed it. It's one that I knew was going to quickly climb into my favorite games, and this is another one that I'm currently playing through solo for my 10x5 solo challenge. The original Everdell came with a solo mode included in the box, and the complete collection, which I have picked up, includes the original solo mode as well as a new solo mode from the Mistwood expansion where you play against a spider called Nightweave. And that's definitely the way that I prefer to play it. I've also played Everdell quite a bit on the digital app, mostly using the original base game solo mode. So if you're not familiar, Everdell is a worker placement and hand management game as well, similar to Underwater Cities in that regard. But unlike Underwater Cities, you will either be building a card into your personal tableau in front of you or placing one of your workers out into one of the locations to take an action on the main player board. In Everdell, you will have very few workers to start in the very first season, and you will play over 4 seasons. Each season, you will either gain additional workers or gain cards into your hand from the meadow. Everdell is all about planning and chaining your actions and cards together to get the most actions total you can in the game and build out the most buildings and critters into your tableau that you can by the end of the game. You do have a limit of 15 cards to be built into your city tableau by the end of the game. And when you start out in the first season, particularly your first game, you think there's no way you're going to be able to do that. And by the time you get into that 4th season, you're often wondering, is there any way I can get rid of some of these cards because there's more that I want to build and I'm out of space? Everdell is, like I said, a stunningly beautiful game. It has worked well for me as multiplayer to teach to other people, as solo. The app works reasonably well also, and it's one that will continue to see the table at my house frequently. It's definitely a game where I can see the more you play, the better you will get at it, the more combinations you will see. And I've just now started digging into the expansion content. I've actually only played with the Mistwood expansion and some of the Belfair content from the complete collection. So that is my number 17, Everdell. Number 16 is also a new game to the list this year. This is the second game on the list from Alexander Pfister, and this one is Cloud Age. Cloud Age was published in 2020. Like I said, it was designed by Alexander Pfister as well as Arno Steinwender. The artwork is from Christian Opperer, and the publisher was Nanox Games and Capstone Games. Cloud Age is a game that I played in my most recent 10x5 solo challenge. So if you're interested in how the solo plays and more details on how the game works, I would encourage you to check out my video linked in my YouTube playlist. Cloud Age is another game that I have only played solo, but I absolutely love the game solo. Cloud Age includes a campaign mode that works for both multiplayer and solo, and it's the primary way that you'll play the game solo. Cloud Age is a hand management, resource management, point-to-point movement, and deck building game. There are a lot of mechanisms going on in Cloud Age, and this is another game that falls solidly into the medium category, leaning towards a medium-heavy game for me. It's not one that I would recommend to play with new gamers or as an introductory game. This is definitely a step up, which is the main reason why I've only played this one solo so far. In Cloud Age, you will play over a number of rounds, and in each round, you'll be playing out several different phases. In the first phase, you're doing a bit of planning, and then you will actually be gaining resources before you go out and move your cloud airship across the board. And you'll be moving across the board a certain number of spaces depending on your levels and the cards that you've been playing. Once you reach a location, you actually have to reach a city location and stop every single round. Then you'll have a decision to make whether you want to actually engage in combat with the Cloud Militia at that location. And you'll have to reach a specific score or combat score before you can consider it a success and gain the resources that are there. Whether you engage in combat or not is your choice, but you'll still put out a cube marker onto that location to mark that that round has been used. After that, you'll be taking some kind of worker placement actions out on a smaller board to the side where you can do things like build cards into your tableau or collect resources and add cards into your deck that you use for navigation in phase 1. Or you can actually do some additional actions with new growth tiles once you get past the initial first game of the campaign or legacy. And then you'll also be able to upgrade your airship and make things better and earn points that way. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you're going to be earning points. A lot of them come from playing the cards in your hand into your tableau, but those cards are also used as a resource. So every time you play a card to your tableau, you have to discard one as well. Cloud Age has been so much fun. I played through most of the campaign. I have several scenarios left to play through, and it's one that I definitely want to get back to the table soon. It's one that I'd also like to introduce to potentially my mom, who has played some Alexander Pfister games, and I think she would enjoy this one because it's just a little bit more streamlined and straightforward with how the phases work on each of the rounds, and it might be one that she'd have fun with. So that is my number 16, Cloud Age. Number 15 is also a new game to the list. This is Santa Maria. Santa Maria is a 2017 game designed by Eilif Svensson and Christian Amundsen Ostby with artwork from Germund Bonnet, and the publisher is Aporta Games. So like I said in my earlier video, Aporta Games is becoming one of my favorite game publishers because it is mostly games that are designed by Christian Amundsen Ostby and Eilif Svensson, and I have found that I very much enjoy their designs. Santa Maria is a game that I originally played at the Dice Tower Retreat last year in September, and it's one that was on my list of games to play at the retreat because I knew they had it in the library and I wanted to try it before I purchased it for my collection. Santa Maria is a tile placement game with dice worker placement. So on your turn, you can take a couple of different actions. You can draft a dice from the general supply of dice that are available and run it down a column on your personal player board and activate all of the actions that you pass as you move the dice down. Or you can choose to play one of your personal blue dice and run that dice across a row on your player board and activate the spaces. You can also spend coins to activate one space on your player board. It gets increasingly more expensive as you do this. The first space costs 1, then 2, then 3. Or you can also build additional tiles by turning in resources, selecting a tile from the 5 that are available each round in 2 different sizes, and then adding it onto your own player board. When you add tiles to your player board, you increase the number of action spaces that are available as you are using dice to activate your player board during the game. You'll also be moving up a prayer track and a conquistador track. The prayer track will actually give you the ability to gain bonuses as well as achieve end game scoring objectives and gain extra dice for your own personal dice pool, which gives you more actions each round. The game plays extremely quickly. It only plays over 3 rounds, at the end of which you'll compare with the other players where you're at on the Conquistador track and earn victory points for that. You'll also be shipping goods that you've collected with a little bit of sort of set collection objectives and trying to create sets of the different shipping tiles in the 4 different categories. Santa Maria is a game that now I have primarily played solo because I am including this one on my current 10x5 solo challenge, and I've been playing through it quite a bit. I actually have completed all 5 of my plays for Santa Maria already, and I'll talk more about how I like the solo play and how it works on my upcoming video for that also. If you have not checked out Santa Maria, I really would recommend taking a look at it if you like tile placement and dice worker placement sort of games. It is absolutely fantastic, a ton of fun, plays quickly. The rule set is pretty simple, and this is one that you could introduce to newer gamers. Definitely adults, I think, would be the target audience here, though not so much for kids. But that is my number 15, Santa Maria. Number 14 is also new to the list this year. This is La Granja. La Granja is a 2014 game designed by Michael Keller and Andreas Odendahl, and the artwork is from Harold Liska. The publisher was Spielworks. La Granja is a game that I have actually only played on Board Game Arena. However, I do have a copy of the new La Granja Master Set coming from the recent Kickstarter, and I think that should deliver really anytime in the next couple of months, which I'm excited for. La Granja is a very interesting game. It falls in the medium-heavy category as well. So this is another one that I do not recommend for new players or for families like with young kids. It's one that you're going to want to step into once you've had a little bit more experience with gaming. If you are interested in kind of heavier, medium-heavy games, then this is one that I have absolutely loved. La Granja has a lot of different things going on in it, but the primary thing that I enjoy about the game is the multi-use cards in the game. So you will have a hand of cards, and each card can be used in one of 4 locations on your personal player board. You can play them at the bottom, which will allow you to add special abilities that only you have throughout the game. You can also play it on the left-hand side of your board so that you can increase your production with your fields. Or you can play it on the right-hand side of your board to increase your hand limit, how many cards you're going to be drawing, increase the amount of money that you're earning, and also allow you to breed pigs, which is one of the resources. The last option is you can play them at the top as market barrows, which will give you individual scoring objectives for places where you can turn in the resources that you're generating to earn victory points, as well as claim spots out on the main board. You can also turn resources in on the main board in different locations. Depending on the game, some of these locations will be marked off at the beginning and then only opened up later on in the game. There's also a phase in the game you're going to be doing some dice drafting to gain different resources. And there's a siesta wake-up track that you'll be managing to look at the turn order for the game. There are so many different elements going on in the game that it's definitely a more challenging one to learn and sort of wrap your head around. But the decision space is just so satisfying, trying to put together the puzzle of how best to play each of the cards that you have in your hand, which ones to play on which side of your board, when to invest in that siesta track, when to make deliveries using your donkeys, which dice to draft. It's just, it's so juicy and I love it. The new deluxe master set has improved artwork and components, double-sided player boards, and it looks like it's going to be absolutely fantastic. It also includes a solo mode, which was designed, I believe, by David Turchi. So I am looking forward to checking that out, and it will be on an upcoming 10x5 solo challenge once I have that in hand in my collection. So that is my number 14, La Granja. Number 13 is what many people will probably think is a controversial pick. Another new game to the list that was not on my list in 2021. This is Red Rising. Red Rising was designed by Alexander Schmidt and Jamie Stegmaier. It was published by Stonemaier Games with artwork from Miles Bensky, Jackie Davis, and Justin Wong. This game was actually published in 2021. Red Rising is a game based on the book series by Pierce Brown of the same name, Red Rising. Before this game was announced by Stonemaier Games under their sort of like pre-order, pre-release marketing, I was not familiar with this book series at all. I hadn't heard of it, hadn't read it, anything like that. Once I pre-ordered the game because I looked at the gameplay and thought it looked interesting, I actually read the first book and enjoyed it quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's in my top 10 books of all time, but I did enjoy the story and was excited to check out the game. This game is based on the earlier game called Fantasy Realms, and it plays very similarly, although they've added quite a bit to it from what I understand. I have not played Fantasy Realms. Red Rising is a game that I have primarily played solo. And that's probably a trend on most of the games that you'll be seeing in this section of the list because a lot of them are heavier games. Red Rising is considered a medium light game and is certainly something that would be simple enough for casual gamers to play or families with maybe older children. There is a lot of reading, so you'll want to keep that in mind. I have actually played this at, I think, 6 players before on Tabletopia online before it was released. But other than that, I have primarily played this one solo. Red Rising is a very simple to play game. On your turn, you will be taking one of 2 actions. You will have a hand of cards, and each of the cards will have different abilities that will come into play. One, when it's played out onto the main board using a deploy action, or just abilities that will be available when you score at the end of the game. Most of the cards have conditions to be met on them for scoring that will bump up their base score to a higher score if you can meet those objectives. So you will have some cards where it says if this character is in your hand at the end of the game and you have no gold cards in your hand, then you get a bonus number of points. Or if this card is with a specific other character from the book series, then you'll gain the extra points. Your goal is to achieve the highest score possible at the end of the game. And the end of the game is going to be triggered by the players. You will be also, during your turns, increasing your location on the fleet track. You will be increasing your influence in the Institute by placing out your own player cubes, and you'll be gaining resources of helium tokens. If at any point, any 2 or more players have achieved 7 on the fleet track with helium cubes that they've collected and influence in the Institute, that will trigger the end of the game. Or if any one player has achieved 7 in 2 of those 3 categories, that will also trigger the end of the game. There is no hand limit in the game, and there are ways to increase your hand size and add additional cards from the base 5 that you start with. And once you get above 7, you will be losing points for each of the cards in your hand. However, since most of the cards score more points than the negative point you're going to lose for having that card in your hand, it's often advantageous to increase your hand size as high as you possibly can. Each player will also have their own player faction that they'll be playing as that gives them a special ability when they gain the Sovereign token as part of their action. The game is extremely easy to play, plays out very quickly. As a solo game, it's one of my absolute favorites. I can play it very quickly. It has a solo mode from the Automa Factory that is not a beat your own score mode. It actually has an opponent that you are trying to beat. And it has several different modes of play and levels of difficulty that you can use. I know this is probably not a pick that a lot of people would agree with. It tends to be a game where people are either hot on it or cold on it. And I happen to be one of the people that is hot on this game. I absolutely love Red Rising, and I am so happy to have it in my collection. So that is my number 13, Red Rising. Number 12 is a game that I got at the end of last year, so it was not on my list in 2021. This is Obsession. Obsession is a game that I was not entirely certain that I would like when I first heard about it, although I am a fan of Jane Austen novels and particularly enjoyed Pride and Prejudice and things of that era. Obsession is a sort of a unique game in the way that the gameplay and the mechanics work together. It's not an overly complex game, although it can appear so from the outside if you haven't played it before. It comes in a big box. The rulebook is fairly extensive, but once you understand the basic mechanics, it plays very smoothly and is something that you could certainly introduce to people who are kind of getting into more complex games. I wouldn't start someone on Obsession necessarily, but it's a great next step game for those who are wanting something just a little bit more. In Obsession, you are going to be managing an estate, and you will have a hand of cards that you will be using as both family members and gentry. So each card is a different person who has different abilities and will gain you different benefits when you use them. You'll also have a set of tiles, and everyone starts with the same tiles in your estate that represent events that you can host at your estate. And you'll have workers that represent the staff that works at your estate and who you have to utilize to host these events. On each of your turns, you will do one of two actions. You will either host an event or you will take a rest action. Most of your turns will be hosting events. To host an event, you're going to select a tile from your tableau in front of you and place it onto your player board. You'll then select gentry cards, this could also be your family members, to play that you will host at that event. Each event has a specific number of gentry that needs to be played, or family members specifically, and you'll add these cards out. Then you'll staff the event. Each event has a different specific staff member that needs to be used in order to staff it, and some of the gentry cards that you play will also require staff, like ladies' maids or butlers. Once you've staffed everything, then you'll collect all of the resources or favors that you earn from hosting the event. This will include increases to your reputation, gaining additional gentry cards, gaining money for income, and in some certain situations, you'll also be able to dismiss cards or gentry from your hand. Not all of the gentry cards are necessarily good. For example, you might have an American heiress come who makes you lose reputation because she might not be the most sophisticated guest at the event, but she might bring you a whole bunch of money. So you might want to use her for a couple of events that you're hosting to increase the money that you have to spend for adding new events to your tiles. But at some point, you'll want to dismiss her because she's worth negative points at the end of the game as well. You'll play over a number of rounds depending on if you're playing the standard or extended game, and at certain points in the game, there will be special events at each of the rounds. All of these are explained in the rulebook, and they're fairly simple after you've played the game through once. I have played this one quite a bit on my solo challenge, which is going on right now. This is another one that's in my current solo challenge. I have played this on Board Game Arena, and I have played it multiplayer with my mom, both at the Dice Tower Retreat and with my copy at home. This is one of my mom's favorite games that we played at the retreat, and she absolutely fell in love with it as well. So it's one that she likes to pull out. The theme really appeals to her as well as myself, and it's one that we've really enjoyed playing together. It can play a bit long, particularly for your first game of it as you figure out the flow, but once you've got it down, the playtime will drop pretty significantly. So this is my number 12, Obsession. To finish it out today and round out this section of the list, just falling short of the top 10 is a game that is basically the exact opposite of Obsession. This is The Bloody Inn. The Bloody Inn is a 2015 game from Pearl Games. It was designed by Nicholas Robert, and the artwork is from Luis Francisco and Weberson Santiago. The Bloody Inn is a smaller box game that is a medium light game that doesn't have a huge complexity level to it. It does, however, have a very macabre theme. As the name implies, you are not doing nice things at this inn. In the Bloody Inn, you will be playing a hand of cards, and on each turn you're going to have 2 actions that you can take. You'll have a board set out in front of you, and a number of guests will be invited each turn to stay at the inn. On your turn, you will be taking actions by playing cards from your hand, which are your accomplices, to, for example, recruit additional accomplices into your hand, build annex buildings onto your property, potentially kill guests that are at the inn, or bury the corpses under your existing annex buildings in order to rob them and take their riches. You can also, instead of playing cards to take one of those main actions, you can take a turn to launder your money. On the board, you will be tracking your money on a score track, but the score track maxes out. And if you reach the end of the score track, you can't earn any additional income until you've laundered the money and moved your tracker back down by turning that into small tokens that are checks in your supply. The objective of the game is to have the most money at the end of the 2 rounds that you'll be playing. You'll go through the deck of visitors and guests twice, and then at the end of that, you will count up to see who has the most money, and that player will be the winner. In the multiplayer version of the game, you will want to bury your corpses if there are any law enforcement policemen in the inn. Otherwise, you will lose money and actually not gain the income for those people that you have killed if they were not buried. In the solo version of the game, which is the primary way that I have played it, if there are any dead bodies that have not been buried when there are policemen exiting the inn, you immediately lose the game. There are very few changes between the multiplayer and the solo game, and my favorite aspect of the Bloody Inn is the tightness of only having 2 actions per turn when you have people in the inn, combined with the multi-use cards, where you will be spending these cards to take different actions, and depending on the type of card that you use, that card may either get discarded or taken back into your hand. I have really enjoyed my plays of the Bloody Inn. It's, like I said, a fantastic solo game that I have really enjoyed. It plays extremely quickly, takes up a very small amount of table space, and if you're okay with the theme, it is definitely one to check out just based on the tightness and the kind of the excitement of the game mechanics and the way that the multi-use cards works in this game. So that will finish it up for today. Number 11 is The Bloody Inn. Thanks so much for joining us today for this section of the list. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe you saw some of your favorites in this section of the list. Feel free to leave me a comment below on which games I am completely wrong about. I fully expect to see some comments about Red Rising down there. Until next time, please consider subscribing to the channel here on YouTube, giving this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well. And have fun playing games with your family, friends, and even solo. Bye.